Welcome to the Knife Junkie podcast, your weekly dose of knife news and information about knives and knife collecting. Here's your host, Bob the Knife Junkie DeMarco.
Welcome to the Knife Junkie podcast. I'm Bob DeMarco. On this edition of the show, I'm welcoming back custom knife maker Tom Nugent of Knives by Nuge. Tom is a longtime outdoorsman with a background in law enforcement who started making knives as a hobby. Then he turned that hobby into his profession. I first came across Knives by Nuge on Instagram, where his crossover camp/hunting/EDC fixed blade knives really caught my eye. Having had the opportunity to talk with Tom in January of 2023, I met him in person at Blade Show that June when I bought from him what is to date my very favorite neck knife, one that I actually carry. We'll catch up with Tom and find out what's happening at our favorite New Jersey knife shop. But first, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and download the show to your favorite podcast app. Also, a great way to help the show is to share it with a friend. That goes a long way. If you want to help in a more monetary way, you can go to Patreon, TheKnifeJunkie.com/Patreon, or scan the QR code on your screen. Again, that's TheKnifeJunkie.com/Patreon.
Adventure Delivered, your monthly subscription for hand-picked outdoor, survival, EDC, and other cool gear from our expert team of outdoor professionals. TheKnifeJunkie.com/BattleBox.
Tom, welcome back to the Knife Junkie podcast, sir.
I appreciate you having me back. It's been a while.
It has been a while. And as we record this, you're just coming off a heady weekend in Texas from the Texas Blade Show. How did it go?
It was a blast. I mean, all those shows are so much fun. And for me, it's like, yeah, like selling knives is an important part of it, but it's just enjoyable to meet customers, like people that are excited, or especially when they come up with one of your knives in their pockets. I have one guy's like, I didn't even know you're going to be here. Look what I got. And it was just like, he was just regular carrying. I'm like, man, that just makes you smile.
What was he carrying?
He was carrying a Wicket.
Oh, nice.
So and also too, you get to see all your buddies. Like the knife industry is so different than like any other industry that I've been a part of. Everybody's so like helpful with each other. Like it's not like that in like the fishing or hunting worlds at all.
Yeah, you used to work in an outdoor shop, right? Kind of in your early days, right?
Yeah, I used to work at a local one that did all sorts of like fishing, hunting, camping. It had everything in there.
So that's a more of a cutthroat industry, if you will.
I wouldn't necessarily say like that cutthroat, but they're not like, you know, I could DM other knife makers, be like, hey, how'd you do that? And they'd be like, sure. And like Shimano isn't like reaching out to Daiwa saying, hey, how'd you make that fishing reel? They're not like that. And granted, I'm sure the bigger companies are like that, but where I'm at right now, it's just so cool. Like having guys and girls that you talk to online, then you get to see them in person, and just like, it's a different world in this industry, which is why it's so much fun.
Yeah, that's kind of what I've ascertained, is that it's probably different with the big, you know, the Benchmades and the Spydercos and such, but amongst custom knife makers and smaller companies, it's kind of an open source kind of situation, because people know that, you know, even if you, Tom, share with a younger maker your techniques, they're not going to be making knives by Nuge. They're going to be making knives by Fabitz or whoever that is. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. And I mean, there's only so many ways to make a knife in general. Like, at least that's going to be good and usable. And like, I know, you know, because you have like every knife under the sun, especially some of the stuff back there on your wall.
Yeah.
Like, not all of those are going to be like the most useful thing, but man, are some of them cool. But like, I was, you know, Taylor Martin from Best Damn EDC.
Yeah.
He's working on a new knife, and it's a bigger drop point fixed blade. And he's like, I'm sorry, the blade looks like the Wicket XL. I'm like, the Wicket XL is just a drop point fixed blade. I don't know. It looks like all drop point fixed blades. There's only so many ways you can make it, you know?
Well, we are going to talk about the Wicket XL, but before we do, I want to ask you about Blade Show Texas in general. I was lamenting the fact before we started rolling that I didn't go this year, and I've never been, actually. I've been out to Texas, a different knife show out there, but everyone kind of sees all of the coverage that comes out of Blade Show Atlanta. What would you say Blade Show Texas is like?
It's a lot easier going. Blade Show Atlanta is a lot. I mean, even the way they have everything set up, like for example, like the table spacing at Blade Show Texas, there's more room from the vendor to vendor behind each other, so they're not like back to back with each other. And there's more space for people to actually walk through the aisles of the Texas one. So it's like you don't feel like crammed in there like sardines. And since everything is in like one smaller room, it's not like you're trying to rush to get everywhere to see everything. You're already in it. So it's a much more intimate show, which is really nice to be a part of.
Today I was talking with Jim about my speculation about Texas Blade. It doesn't seem like there's much pressure to come out with your new thing for Texas. I'm not saying that people don't introduce knives at the Texas Blade Show, but it seems like it's SHOT Show for bigger companies. And then for most makers, it's Atlanta Blade Show, where people kind of introduce new models and really make a big deal out of it. Would you say that's true?
There weren't like a ton of new models, but there was a lot of collaborations, which were cool, like small little batches and stuff. Like LT Wright did one with Jack Wolf knives. And
Oh,
so
yeah.
they did a fixed blade version of one of their folders, and LT Wright was the OEM for it. And this thing was super slicey. And I'm like, no, I love LT, but normally his flat grinds aren't the sliciest things in the world. But this one, I held it. I'm like, this thing's a razor. This is sweet. So stuff like that, they had a lot of like fun little like collaborations that you can only get a few of.
Yeah, I saw that. It's like a fixed blade version of his Vampire Jack, which I'm a
Yeah.
huge fan of. And oh man, I was burning with sinful envy when I saw that. I was like, ah,
Yeah. LT did it justice. It was really sweet.
beautiful. Um, so let's talk a little bit about your knife making past, just in case anyone hasn't seen the other show, the other interview we did. Tell us how you got into knife making.
So I got into knife making really from jujitsu. One of my buddies that I train with there, he was telling me about this Walter Sorrells guy on the on the YouTube, and I'm like, he's like, you should try this one day because he knew I was handy. I like to do a lot of woodworking and stuff like that. And then I made a prison shank that looked like one of Walter Sorrells' knives. It did not look that close, but it resembled it. And I'm like, oh, this is pretty sweet. And I actually carried it at work for a while. And I'm like, oh my God, it works. I mean, and then it just started spiraling from onwards. And eventually it got to the point where like I was getting commissions for everything. And people were asking me to make them more knives. And I was doing a whole litany of like culinary and like, fillet knives and all the other things. And then the EDC knives started to pick up with not just my friends wanting to buy them or family members, like actual random people on the internet. And it got to the point where I was making knives instead of going into overtime because it was one, I didn't have to strap on a bulletproof vest and go to work. And two, I could do it from my home. And it got to the point where it's like, I think I could do this as a full-time job. And about 2 years ago, right after actually 2 years ago with our podcast, I think we were on the podcast together like a month after I quit. Which retired, quit, whichever you want to say. I'm pretty sure it was quit. But so for people that don't know, I'm saying I quit from my police officer job that I was doing for about 8 years. So it's been a wild ride since then for sure, but I'm very happy with where things have been going.
What, how has life been since quitting? I mean, because police. Here's my what I imagine. Being a policeman, has its certain securities in terms of job security and insurance and that kind of stuff. But it's also kind of a very dangerous. Not kind of. It's a very dangerous job, and every day on the job, could be your worst day. So, what's it been like going from police officer to knife maker?
It's just a different type of stress, and it's a lot of learning and everything. It's not that it's stress free, but granted, nobody's came into my shop and tried to kill me yet, which is neat. So
Yeah, that's neat.
I can't complain about that. But you know what? The biggest stress difference that I've noticed is because I've been a first responder my whole life. I got my EMT cert when I was 16 and then did that up until I was a police officer. And I got very good at dealing with like the in the moment, like triage style stress, where I was like, process and execute, do what you have to do. But now it's different because now it's like I'm making like 6 month to year long plans, and you can overthink the hell out of it. I'm like, oh boy, this is it's stressful, but a different type of stress. It's not the immediacy, but it's almost the long termness that I got to start getting used to.
It's like you went from a tactical thinker to a strategic thinker.
Exactly. And it's learning that has been a little, difficult, but so is learning how to make knives and run a business and everything else. It's so I'm figuring it out as I go though. And that's kind of been the basis of all of this.
So how did you actually learn the skills? Because it's obvious you have them, and this is the primitive. This is the primitive Wicket, the little neck knife, the first one that I got from you, and then you just sent me something that I love it so much. Thank you, by the way.
Of course.
I know it's nice to thank you in person, but these knives are great. And what I'm showing here, both of the ones I have, I'm a sucker for your primitive model because they're jute cord wrapped and they kind of have a rough aesthetic to them. But you do really, really refined work. A lot of tall, perfect flat grinds and really nice handle treatments and everything. How did you learn all this?
I was self-taught. I don't have any formal training or didn't go to any schools or anything. I am very analytical at times, and also I tell people all the time, like all the information's on the internet. We have this amazing resource with all of human knowledge in one place, and you could use it for more than funny cat videos. You could actually use it to learn a lot. So lots of podcasts, lots of YouTube videos, lots of and also too, lots of just like looking at things and like, how can I do it better? Like one of the knives that I have on my desk is I got the original primitive Wicket, like the first one. And it's made a lot of changes since then. I mean, the blade actually is physically smaller than the one that's out in your hand right now. The jute isn't nearly as good. I didn't wrap it all the way back. The Scandi grind, I mean, it works, but it's not the prettiest thing in the world. So it's a lot of looking at things and how can I do this, make the knife better, and also how can I do it more efficiently.
So when you're assessing your own designs, like you were with the primitive Wicket, what are you looking for? I mean, because you're a hunter, an outdoorsman, but also a former police officer and a martial artist. So there's a lot of different knife usage across all of those different areas of interest. So what are you looking for, and how do you assess your work?
I look at things, and for me, it's like, first and foremost, it's like, do I even notice it while I'm using it? Because the example is like when you got a bad pair of boots. When you have a bad pair of boots, you notice that there's a problem with them. And the same thing with using a knife. You almost want to, you're using the knife to do a task. The knife is just the middle thing there, right there. You're not supposed to be focusing on obviously don't cut yourself, but you should be focusing on the task you're doing with the knife, not the knife. So if it just fits in your hand and it just works and it cuts, you're focusing on what you need to actually do and not whether if the knife is fighting you or not, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense actually. What does that have to do with how you choose grinds? I mean, because on the Wicket, you've got a Scandi grind, but on most of your knives, it seems you're doing like tall, high flat grinds, and so is that part of it? How do you decide what grinds to put on what knives? And
It depends on options for things because there is no one perfect knife for everything. You can't have it. It does not exist. Which is good for me because that means I can make a whole bunch of models and stuff like that. But like the full flat grind, I personally like it on the Wicket model for when I'm going like fishing or food prep or a light EDC test and everything. Where on the primitive Wicket, when it comes to the Scandi grind, it's a more stout blade. You can even baton with that little thing. And not saying you're going to be batoning a tree in half with it, but I feel safer using the Scandi grind for harder use than I would the full flat grind. Just because it's just the edge geometry behind it. And also too, with the Scandi grind, you got so much mass of steel up there. It's like, it's just going to be a more stout knife. So it really depends on what you're doing with the thing.
So when you're, say, heading out into the outdoors, do you take one of each?
Sometimes I look like I got a golf club bag full of knives on me. But it really like it depends on what kind of trip I'm doing because that's the thing is I do so many different things outdoors where if I'm going like fly fishing or something like that, I'm probably taking like a Wicket as a neck knife or a different model like a chickpea with a saber grind. Something that's light. I'm just gonna be cutting a line with it and stuff like that. But then other trips, like I have a Wicket Big Boy that I made, which is just a jumbo size version of the thing. But I'll take that thing in the Scandi grind. Like this is my personal one. I actually came prepared this time. I have a pile full of knives on the
Oh,
desk.
cool. Let's see. Yeah, let's see him.
This is the big boy. So it's a much obviously larger size Wicket, but this is a knife I'd pair with the full flat grind Wicket. Like I would have the full flat grind Wicket as a neck knife for a light task and walk around. You can leave this thing at camp if you want, but this is more of your processing tool, like wood, food cooking, and everything else like that. That's when you have a bigger model like this. So really, like, will complement each other if that tracks.
Yeah, no, that tracks. So let me show this off. I've shown this off on a couple of shows so far and put out my video on it, but this is the Wicket XL, the primitive Wicket XL. Is that what you would call this?
Yeah.
Okay. I really love this. And you took special care to make a real serious 90-degree spine. And I did something I've never done in a video. I lit a fire with it, scraped the ferro rod with it. It works so well. And it carves so nicely and it feels just great in hand. I've been carrying this a lot in this new ambidextrous sheath. I want to talk about the sheath, but I want to finish talking. Well, we're not going to finish talking about your knives, but since I was asking you about flat grinds and such, do you have any on the table you could show off?
I do. This is one of the more production flat grinds. So Nitro V stainless steel. Say in my card handle, but as you can see behind the tip, it gets very thin because it's meant to be a thin, slicey knife.
Yeah.
So this is something that I've used for deer hunting, and it's because it's a great skinning model. You get your finger all the way up there on the tip, that big belly. So, like, granted, I would not start batoning like oak with this thing because it's not meant for that. However, with the primitive Wicket XL, you can, and that's why I like the XL size because it fits that middle ground between like the Wicket, which is more of like a neck knife in my opinion, or like a small EDC knife. Mm-hmm. Or the big boy, where it's like if you want to go out with one, most days I end up with a Wicket XL in my pocket.
Wait, did you just say that the one you were holding up is a production model?
Yes, we are starting to get into that a little bit, which is fun. It's a whole different world, but we're working on it. So the blades are ground out in Seattle, and then the handles are done on a CNC. And then I pretty much get everything together like Johnny Cash Cadillac and assemble it here in house. So I'm still going to be doing like fully handmade and custom stuff, but the demand has been to the point where I can't keep up. And so we're starting to introduce models like the Wicket and the Wicket XL, and then hopefully a few more by Blade Show Atlanta, but we shall see.
That's cool. So this is kind of mid-tech in the old school sense of the term. Where the
however you would want to argue it on the internet because everybody's got a different definition of it.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it always meant like, it's the maker's project, and like a composer or a producer, you have someone that you trust doing this part, someone you have trust doing this part, and then you bring it together, and it's your design. You synthesize it, you sharpen it, whatever, put it together. I think that's awesome. That's brilliant. And it's a great way to keep up with demand, which is a great problem to have, by the way.
Yeah, it's still a problem though, because I mean, it's a good thing to have, but I've also never wanted to be the elusive thing you can't get. I would like to have something that's available to people. Wow. And that doesn't mean I'm not going to still do like small batch stuff and everything like that and do like, only runs of 20 of certain knives. But like, I would like to have like the meat and potatoes of the lineup covered so people can actually get a knife. Because I mean, this is happening with me. Like if I can't buy something and I go to the website all the time to buy it and it's never available, I just go buy something different that's close enough. Like I know that's probably happened with me where it's like guys can't get the knife and there's plenty of great knife makers and companies out there. They just go buy something else. So you need to have it available.
So what's your business model been so far? Drops?
Mostly drops, yeah. And mainly just for the reason that I'm just randomly figuring things out as I go. I wish I could say I had a grand plan, like all laid out and everything, but it doesn't really exist right now. In the future, hopefully, at least with the production stuff. But it's been a lot of like whatever I feel like I've been wanting to make or what the customers have been asking, because that's been always very helpful. Is I like to listen to customer feedback of what they're looking for and what they want. I mean, I'll even do Instagram videos, be like, literally tell me what you guys want and I'll figure it out and make it, which is always helpful to have people like that.
You mentioned the chickpea before. Do you have one on hand to show off?
I do. The chickpea is a happy middle ground between the Wicket and the Wicket XL. Same blade length as the Wicket XL, same handle length, but skinnier blade than the Wicket. So very comfortable. You could get your full grip on that same thing, but with this leather sheath and rides in the pocket, it takes up like no real estate, which is really nice.
This is cool. The leather sheath. This is something new for you?
This is something new. These are made by Badger Claw Outfitters or Badger Claw Leather, whichever one you find them on. He's the same guy on Instagram, but he's great. John over there does excellent work. And what we did is we added eyelets on the back.
Oh yeah.
That way, like I'm having them come standard with the DCC clip, which I like. But if you like ulti clip, just buy an ulti clip and put it on there. It's like we made it modular for everybody, which is nice because there's no way I'm going to please everybody. So might as well give them options.
I love that. Can you hold that up and hold it still so we can check it out for a second?
Sure. And
I love that.
It was cool at Texas too, because I love like the Kydex ambi sheets, like the one that came with your primitive Wicket XL, like these two.
Yeah.
However, it's like and I tell this with people with knives all the time. Most of the time, it's not a bad knife or like bad materials or whatever. It's just not for you. If like you could just have a preference that doesn't fit that. Where some guys don't like the Kydex pocket sheaths because it's a little chunky in the pocket. And it's when you reach in to get your car keys, you have hard plastic. Whereas with this guy, it's soft. So you reach in and you can actually get past the soft leather a little bit easier, and it doesn't beat up your knuckles going in there. However, with the Kydex ambi sheath, it has that nice opening at the top that always stays open.
Yeah.
The leather can collapse down a little bit. So you just have to guide yourself in a little bit more. But I mean, you're not really doing too many tactical operations with this leather sheath and chickpea. So I don't think you'll have to be worried about speed that much.
Right.
But
Like, there's never a need there's never a need for speed when you're putting your knife back in the sheath.
No.
Maybe when you're drawing it, but I don't think.
Like when it comes to like at the previous job, it's like that's when something like say you're taking somebody down, like with your gun holster. You want to be able to holster that thing without even looking at it. And I understand that. But with what we're doing here, like cutting fishing line and going camping or cutting an Amazon package, like we could slow down a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. And leather, oh man, I love leather. It's such a great material. Kind of like jute. I was mentioning when we were texting, I love how I don't want to call it soft because it's not necessarily soft, but you might look at the jute and think that it's going to be itchy next to your bare skin. But this has been a companion ever since I got it because it's so thin. And part of that is because it's jute wrapped, but it's also very comfortable. And that's for the same reason. I really like, certain materials, and that happens to be one of them. Leather is another one. I think I'm going to have to keep my eyes out for a chickpea drop. I just saw, and people could be listening to this or watching this anytime, but if they're watching it as it dropped, you did a pre-Texas Blade Show drop, which has some chickpeas in it, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm going to have to keep my eyes peeled on that.
Yeah, it's actually one of my oldest knives. The chickpea has been around before the Wicket.
Oh, really?
And I actually designed this knife to be a replacement to Boy Scout knives. Because for some reason, which drives me up a wall, fixed blades are not allowed in the Boy Scouts, because they say they're not safe. Now, granted, I'm sure if you had like the trench tool you got behind you with the brass knuckles and the 7-inch blade, sure, don't give the Boy Scouts that. However, this little thing is actually safer. I wanted it to be the same size as a slip joint in the hand because that's what the issue of the Boy Scouts. So nothing too crazy, nothing that's you're gonna pull out and have a parent stop you from using what you're doing, and just a do-all style knife. And then a bunch of grown men and women started liking the knife, and it just took off from there.
I mean, you could easily argue that the slip joint that you get as a Boy Scout is way more dangerous because the whole thing could fold on your hand. You know,
Yeah, I've seen it many a times, and had to teach many a lessons afterwards about knife safety. But that's what the standard issue is a slip joint, and it's for me it makes no sense because a fixed blade is inherently going to be safer because there are no moving parts. There is no deploying it. I mean, I even cut my hand with a slip joint pretty bad last year, which is why I don't trust myself with folding knives anymore. So it's just a much safer option, and I really do like this knife, and I'm glad it's still in the lineup.
let's talk a little bit about the ambidextrous G10 sheath, which I know you were working on for a little while, and you perfected. What first of all inspired you to make an ambidextrous sheath, and then what went into the R&D of creating this?
So I actually started using them originally when Josh from Offensive Industries was
Oh,
making them for me, and he does killer work with those things. And then it got to the point where I'm like, Josh was getting so busy with his own knives, and then I just asked him like, "How do you like?" I would look at and this is my over analytical mind. I'm like, I could figure this out. But then also I just hit up Josh. I'm like, how do you do this? And he walked me through everything, which was super helpful. Which is like what I was saying before about the knife industry being so different. Like here's another maker showing me how to make a sheath that he's famous for. So it's cool that it works that way. And even with the XL specifically, or the primitive one, it was actually a little difficult to dial this one in because on the right side of the handle, that side right there, where you have different rights and lefts,
Yeah.
there's actually a little bit of a hump from when the jute goes in. So it was easier to figure out the ones with the slab handle scales because they were uniform on both sides.
Right.
But this one, it took a lot of finagling to get it down just pat. And that's why this one took a little bit longer. And I think I made about like 7 or 8 sheaths before that all ended up in the trash before we got dialed in on this package.
I love it. So this has I've been carrying this ever since you sent it to me, and something I've been noticing is that ease of return. And like you said, it's always open, unlike a softer leather pocket sheath. But it takes very little to find it and put it away. It's got a very satisfying. I don't know. It's not a click like on a Kydex, like this Kydex sheath where it clicks in, but it's got a really nice, gratifying feel when it's in there. And part of that is you've got the Velcro, the soft side of the Velcro on the forward portion here, which kind of stops it from rattling. I also think it probably saves the knife from scratching against the hardware on the inside from the DCC clip, which is a great choice, by the way.
It's one of my favorites.
Have you received a lot of accolades for this? People digging it or what?
People like it a lot. But like I said at Blade Show Texas, this is why I love doing in-person things. A lot of people were actually gravitating towards the leather pocket sheaths. And I actually had a couple people that bought some knives that came with this style sheath. And they went over to John, who had a table, and bought a leather sheath from him.
Oh.
And but like I said, people has different preferences, and I just do my best to try to meet as many of them. Just like these come with Scandi grinds, but I also do a series with the full flat grind, and you try to cover all the bases that you can.
So, as the knife maker, how much do you kind of listen to what the people want, or how much? I know you listen, but I mean, how much does it take to get you to start steering the ship in a different direction? Do you listen for like an overwhelming response to one idea and go with that, or is it kind of what strikes your fancy?
A mix of both. Like I listen a lot to customer feedback. I also look at analytics because analytics don't lie. Like I said, I'm very into the reading way too deep into things. However, it's like you can see what people are requesting back in stock on my website. What do people want? I'm like, literally let the customer tell you what they want. When it comes to like doing other wild and like everybody always wants to have a different steel. They'll like, hey, can you do that in crew wear? Hey, can you do that in whatever steel they decided is the most popular for the day? And I'm like, okay, we need to slow this down a little bit because that's stuff that when with me, I test all of these knives thoroughly. I junk a lot of them before they ever get to the market. And if I was to just use a whole bunch of different steels, I don't know where I'd find the time to test all of them. Because I mean, I could tell you that certain steels are not going to react the same way to certain grinds and everything else. So I don't know if, say, if like a crew wear would jive on my full flat grind Wicket. It probably would do fine, but like I'm not going to sell something with the probably it will do fine as the selling point. Like
Yeah.
that's, I like to know how they're going to perform, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And
Yeah.
I think that's a good call too, because you could constantly be changing it up for the steel of the hour, but really not be very good at heat treating it for a while. And you don't want those knives to be out in the wild. Both of my Wickets are 80 CRV2. Is this your primary steel of choice?
It's one of my favorites between that and AABL or Nitro V. The ADCRV2, I know sometimes it gets a bad rap for its edge retention, but I actually sold a knife to a customer at Blade Show, Texas, that was my beater knife all winter long. Because we burned two fireplaces here. I got one for the shop, one for the house. So I'm constantly feeding wood stoves. And that was my go-to. It was a big boy with the ADCRV2 primitive finish on it, and the customer just kept wanting to buy it from me. And I'm like, no, this is my user. I've used this thing all winter long. And eventually I'm like, fine, I'll take your money. But and I told him like there was no edge damage though. And all I did was strop the thing. I would clean off fat wood resin
Mhm.
and strop it. And a couple times you would have like the times when you're prepping the wood in the morning and you accidentally hit the rocks in front of the fireplace, but it's still fine. It all came back with a strop. I didn't have to take it to stones or anything, which is why I love that steel and I just know how it's going to perform. And also I know it's pretty bomb proof.
It's meaning very tough, right?
Yes.
It's a high carbon steel, right?
Yep.
EDC grade. Okay. And then what do you do to make the primitive finish? I know you Cerakote some stuff, or don't you? Or
Yeah, but with the
that's
primitive, that's actually the heat treat finish.
oh, okay. It's
So
still
that's the way it comes out of heat treat.
so each time it's unique, it's different.
You're never gonna I can't make two the same. It's impossible.
Yeah. Wow. So you use two fireplaces to heat everything up. So that oh my God, that's like a little fantasy of mine. We're actually starting a little house project here, and I was really opting for a wood stove for a while, but it looks like we're not going to be doing that.
It
Um,
provides that special warmth, and it's just like being by a campfire, especially when you have the glass ones and everything. Like, it's just that warming feeling, and it's such a nice dry heat. And then too, from like more of a self-reliance standpoint,
mm.
that you could not get your oil tank filled and still have heat. Like even if we, a generator and everything all set up, but like even if all that goes, like we could still heat our house, we could still cook. The pipes aren't going to freeze because we provide our own heat. So, and that's huge for Jersey, where it just seems to be cold and wet for half the damn year.
Yeah, people have a uh, maybe one-dimensional idea of New Jersey. I think like a lot of people think it's very urban and suburban, but I know from experience there are some really beautiful and wild areas of New Jersey. Is that kind of where you're living?
Yeah, I live on the northern end of the state. I actually live, I mean, down the road from the Appalachian Trail. So we are about 1,800 feet up in elevation. I'm surrounded by three state forests, got a bunch of lakes around me. It is gorgeous. But also, Newark and New York City is still only 45 to minutes to an hour away. So very quickly, you could end up back in the concrete jungle.
One jungle to another. But that's pretty cool. What is it like in terms of knife laws? I mean, we know that New Jersey is a pretty strict place for guns, that's for sure. What's it like for knives there?
It's reasonable use, which I hate because it's a gray law. It depends on who the cop is, and it depends who the judge is and how good your lawyer is. Um, and I would always explain it where it's like, if you were to walk into Starbucks with a machete, that's going to be a no-no. But if you were to go to the woods and you're clearing your deer stand out and you have that same machete on you, then that's fine. So like that's also where the Wicket and certain other knives came out, because I'm like, I could walk through suburbia and not be worried about having this on me and not be worried about like getting those weird looks from people. And also deep carry pocket sheets are nice for that too, because
Yeah.
if they don't see it, they don't ask any questions.
Yeah. Well, I mean, those two scenarios you laid out seem reasonable. We have open carry where I live, but you'd have people freaking out if you just walked around with a Bowie knife on your leg, even though it's perfectly illegal. So, yeah, the grayness of the law, I'm not so fond of. But the fact that you're allowed to carry and buy these things is, that's good enough. I know you don't have it that way with guns.
Well, it's like, or I wish it was like that with guns, because now it's funny. Now I used to, when I was a cop, I could conceal carry wherever I wanted. And now being in New Jersey, I switched professions and all of a sudden, like, nope, you can't do that anymore. I'm like, I was just the same guy who was protecting children in schools. And I just changed job titles. And they're like, but that's New Jersey. I like where I live. I don't like the state so much. And I'm sure a lot of people in the tri state area up here would agree with that statement.
I lived in New York City for about 12 years, 12 or 13 years. And I walked around with stuff. I was so clueless. I walked around with big knives in my waistband. And now when I think of it, I shudder, because if I had gotten busted, I would have been, you'd be talking to me from Rikers Island, basically.
Well, that's also why neck knives are actually nice in New York City, because I can tell you this, cops aren't looking for neck knives, not in the city. They're looking for pocket clips. They're
Right.
looking for the easy things and everything. Where a neck knife, especially with the leather lanyard, it just looks like a necklace. Like
Yes.
nobody's going to know it's there. Not saying doing anything illegal. I'm just
No.
saying.
Certainly not. Certainly not. But yeah, you do have some. I'm going to show this off just while we're talking about it. A really nice leather. What do you call this? Lanyard or whatever,
Yeah.
necklace to hang this around, and you have this really cool clip on it. The Wazoo clip, I think it is.
Yep.
What inspired this as opposed to a piece of paracord?
The Wazoo Spark necklace, which I keep on my primitive Wicket, my personal one. And so what that is a ceramic striker and a small ferrocerium rod. And I was using this and it's so comfortable. And the nice part about the leather lanyard too is that it can come off of the sheath very easily. You could just undo that snap and it pulls right through. When I was doing the pop snaps, you would have to cut the paracord to then take it off. Or if you did it without the pop snaps, then you would have to, retie it every time. But I also like personally having a failure point. I know the chances of falling down a ravine and then being caught by a branch by your paracord necklace and then it choking you to death is very low. But it's just something about it I can't get past. So
Well, you're a
having
jiu-jitsu guy.
well, that and just enough. I've been a first responder for almost as like half my lifetime.
Yeah.
You see a lot of once in a lifetime things that you just like, yeah, I've seen enough. So I like having a failure point.
That's interesting you say that. I never quite thought of that, because all of my neck knives except for this one are basically paracord, or my daughter sometimes makes these little leather braids that I like to use. But they would all totally garrot me if they got caught. But I'm like, what are the chances? But it's interesting that you say that, because as a first responder, yeah, you're seeing people at their worst on their
All the
worst
time.
day. Yeah.
Yeah, all those once in a lifetime occasions you get to see on a daily basis. So you just get a little more squirrely about things like that. But
So I'm sorry. What were you
no,
gonna say?
I just want to say about the leather lanyard too. The nice part is it's adjustable. It screws in. So the top of this will actually the leather threads in. So most of these snaps, that's why I get them from Wazoo, because they have them made for themselves. And I'm pretty sure they have a patent on this. So they actually have the leather threaded in there. So if you want to adjust it or cut it shorter, you just unscrew it and then you could trim it to whatever length you want. Obviously, you can't add material back. So just cut it accordingly. Don't go crazy, but you can adjust it.
I just mentioned your jiu-jitsu background. You've been training in Brazilian jiu-jitsu for a long time, and you said that was part of a guy that you train with is the one who suggested you start making knives. So that's kind of the beginning. When you look back from here, how much would you say is influenced by your knowledge of that kind of fighting?
There actually are certain knives that I make that make. I haven't had the time to make them because I've been so busy and I only am a one-man show. But there's certain models like this one, which is I call the CF3, which is a karambit style knife. And it's not, I didn't make a karambit to be like wild, crazy, flippy stuff because I'm just not trained in that. However, I designed this knife with one of the guys I went to the police academy with. And he was actually in line of duty shooting, and he got shot in the head, and he's still here, so that's good. But the guy was on top of his hips, on top of him on mount. He couldn't get to his handgun, and the perp was able to get his handgun out of his waistband. So he wanted to have something as like a pretty much a get off me tool, which is what that was designed for. You get your finger in there, you know where the business ends go, and you apply and reapply until applying is no longer needed. And then you have space. It's not, and also too, it's meant for utility because most of the time I was eating my lunch with this knife or cutting deer out of soccer nets and stuff like that. It's like the stuff you don't think about, or even like batoning this through car battery cables because you were sick and tired of listening to the alarm go off for 20 minutes at a wreck. Utility knife and defensive knife in the same.
Right. Hold that up for a second if you don't mind.
Sure.
Oh, that's nice, man. So you haven't made this one in a while? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and we're working on bringing them back, and then hopefully with a variant of it, which is called the Molkeen, and this is actually the smaller version. So we're calling the mini Molkeen, and this is the CF3. Same blade profile, but this one with the bird's beak back there. So more of a universal grip, fit more hands and everything like that. But still, when you draw it, you have that hook that you could draw and grab and then still manipulate however you want. And same with the thicker blade stock than what I normally do with the Wickets. You got the swedge up there for that piercing and utility purposes. And this one, we're thinking about coming standard with this ambi style sheath. And as you see and you could draw it out just enough to get it and use it. And then, when you're not doing all the crazy flippy stuff, just put it in your hand like a normal person and use it as a tool.
That looks great. Sorry for oohing and ahhing while you were talking there. But yeah, that's beautiful. I mean, it looks really nice. I really like the blade shape of both of those knives. But that handle and with that sheath, that's a marriage made in heaven right there.
We're hoping to have them back, at least get a run of them going. And run of them, I have to make all these things. So I'm trying to sound like a production facility. I'm going to be grinding everything. Hopefully by Blade Show Atlanta, I want to bring these things back. Because like I said, most of my stuff is like hunting, camping, fishing related. But I do have this background in law enforcement and first responders. So it's like, I would like to have this in the lineup still as well.
The one with the ring that you just had out reminds me a little bit of a bird and trout in a strange way. Bird and trout knife, except it's much thicker.
Yeah,
there might be some sort of a crossover there for you.
Well, you can still use it. I mean, I've taken the bigger version out. This is the Molkeen. I've taken this thing camping many a times, which is why there's all the rust and everything up there. Not because I wanted to, just to say I did. It's not my go-to bushcraft knife. However, it absolutely can. And this one is bigger, thicker stock and everything like that, textured in the hand. So you absolutely could use these in the field. I mean, I could clean a deer with this thing. It's just not my go-to because another thing like edge geometry comes into play here, where this guy is way thicker behind the edge and more stout than, say, like a Wicket XL or a Wicket and like a chickpea or something like that. Because these are designed for knuckle draggers doing stuff that you're not supposed to be doing with knives. Like my CF3, we were doing some training, some QCB training in the school, and one of the guys on the SWAT teams was like, "Hey, can I borrow a knife?" It's always the hesitant. You look at him like, I'm
Yeah.
not sure about this one, but okay. And then I'm like, sure. And I gave him this one. And lo and behold, he starts prying a shell casing out of a UMP. And I'm like, I have a Leatherman in my bag. You could have asked for that. But granted, that's why the tip is still there, because it's meant for abuse, where it's not also going to have the same kind of field performance say if you're hunting, where you want that sliciness and effortless cutting, because it's just not, you can't, like I said earlier in the podcast, you can't have both and you can't have everything.
Yeah, but you offer a lot of different things. I mean, you can get thin and slicey, you can get this thick and robust. You can get big ones, you can get small ones. I know that the Wickets have been a real big seller, but how do your bigger knives work? You held up the big
The big boy.
yeah, the big boy. I don't mean how did they work? I know they work well, but I mean, how did they work in terms of sales? I was on your website. I saw a lot of those are like many of them, most of them are gone. Are these big sellers enough that you make them regularly, or how does that work with
They
you?
are. It's just been a time constraint. Because the Wickets and the Wicket XLs have been so popular that I've been focusing on that, and that is actually what is funding all these production runs and everything. Because like, I wish I one day stumbled into a pile of money. However, I did not. And so lots of 12 to 14-hour work days is what is funding all these projects and everything. And that's why I was hammering down on some of the more popular models. But with production and everything, like taking some of the burden off of me where it's can get them out there a bit, I can then focus on doing these other models. Like I got all sorts of ideas in my heads of things that I want to bring out that I just haven't had the ability to. And we're trying to get back into hunting and fishing land a little bit, because originally that's where I really come from, like hunting, fishing, camping background. And EDC land has really taken over a lot of the knives. And I don't mind one bit. But for me, it's like I've designed every knife in my lineup for an outdoor test, not necessarily for what can open up the package the best. If that, it's granted, I'm sure if it could clean a trout, it could probably open up a box.
Yeah, for sure. But I mean, so this you're saying you want to go more towards the hunting and fishing from this? I mean, this is pretty outdoorsy, isn't it?
So there's another model that I've released last year, which is called the Bruin, which is this bigger full size model. So it's imagine like a chickpea on steroids. I wanted something with a full handle grip, 3.5-inch blade, maybe a little bit longer. I'd have to check my own website. But I was actually using the Wicket XL for the past 2 years deer hunting, and I wanted something with a little skinnier of a blade and that longer, more acute point to do those finer initial tasks and field dressing everything. But I also wanted something that I could take camping and just have this be the one knife where you could baton with this thing, food prep. I could probably even fillet a trout with this thing in this style grind. And it's been working out great for me. So I'm hoping to push into some more of these bigger knives by, yet again, Blade Show Atlanta. We're actually going to be coming out with some production versions of this one by then.
Wait, hold that up so we can see it.
If the stars align. And I know I said I mostly do ADCRV2 and Nitro V or ABL. This one's actually in 3V, and I've been playing with some CPM 154. Thoroughly impressed so far. Actually, the first one of this I ground it too thin by accident because it was the first one I was doing, and I didn't feel comfortable selling it. I took it actually thinner than I do my Wickets. So for a knife this size with that thin of a grind, I'm like, I don't know how I feel about it. So I sent it to my buddy who's broken a few of my knives in testing before. I said, do your thing, do your worst, and report back. And he must have batoned this thing for a couple hours through oak and everything else, and 0 edge damage. And I'm like, not that I would take the models that thin all the time, but it's just nice to know that it can do that.
And that was the 3V, right?
That was a 3V. And I know if I did it in Nitro V, it would have failed because I've taken Nitro V that thin before, and it has. ADCRV2, it probably would have held up in that same kind of edge geometry. And not to get all like super nerdy and geeky and stuff like that. But I'm just saying, like, it's just good to know that these kind of steels can do that kind of work.
Yeah, that's not nerdy and geeky. I know that like for outdoors knife users, 3V has become the real premium steel because it's so tough. It holds a great edge, and then But I mean, really, what I know it for is its toughness. I think I have 2 or 3 3V blades here, and I don't push my blades to the limit. Certainly not. But I have batoned a 3V Bark River knife quite a bit, just through whatever the kiln dried wood is I pick up at the grocery store. And it does great. I mean, it's really awesome, especially with a convex grind. It
Mhm.
just it pops the little logs in half, pretty easily. And it's like you just strop it up a little bit.
It's proven. It's been very proven, which is same thing with like CPM 154. All these steels have been around for a while. And I'm not trying to, I don't like keeping up with fads. I like making stuff that works. It's like, one of the things that we've been saying is like, it's timeless designs with modern precision. We're using stuff that has always worked, designs that will always continue to work, and we're bringing them into the modern world. That just makes sense. And that's why I like ADCRV2, Nitro V or ABL, and now like 3V, because like people before me have figured out that these things work. I didn't need to invent it. They already did all the legwork for me. And I did my own testing, but it just now it all lines up.
I also love 154. That's one of my favorite steels. And it's been around a long time, and it's what a lot of custom knife makers like to use. I think it's a great balance of edge retention, corrosion resistance. I guess it's pretty tough because you'll see some smaller fixed blade knives in it as well. But I just love 154. It's great. But let me ask you this: say 3V, for instance. When you buy a 3V knife, you're paying a lot more. Um, in your experience, does it cost a lot more as a knife maker to buy it, or is it the incidentals like grinding it, belts and that kind of thing that push up the expense of a 3V model?
It's the working of it, it's the labor, because all these things, even when it comes to the knives, like it's all labor costs is what you're really paying for. Obviously, like abrasives, tooling, everything else, but it's time. And that's the most expensive part that goes into these things. Like say if you just were to put the micarta and everything else into a pile and say, all right, that's the knife. It's like, it wouldn't be that expensive, but you have to then turn that into the knife. And you're also paying for years of experience and years of me throwing stuff in the trash, figuring these things out and learning. So it's mostly labor costs and stuff, like even like a steel like Magna Cut, which I just hate grinding it. It fights you. It feels like it's pushing back against you on the grinder. That's why those normally come with those higher price tags, because it's the tooling and stuff. I know manufacturers that don't even like to play around with it because it doesn't play nice with tooling.
That's interesting. I mean, that's something we might tend to forget as non-knife makers, that we're not just paying for the materials itself, but like anything else, we're paying for the labor and then the wear and tear on the tools that it takes to actually, make the knives.
Yeah, there's so much more that goes into it. And even when it comes to like pricing knives, it's actually one of the hardest things to do out of this whole business is come up with pricing, because I wish there was just some kind of formula where A plus B equals C, but it's not that way at all.
Have you found that people want to pay a certain amount for a knife? Like they feel like if it's under $200, it's not worth it, or do you run into that kind of philosophy?
There is the idea of pricing things appropriately, and I've done a lot of like reading and listening to like the whole psychological effects of everything. Like the one of the famous studies is like Peloton. When Peloton first came out, it was $1,000, and people thought, "Oh, this cheap treadmill can't be that good." But then they re-released it at like 2,500 or something, and they're like, "Ooh, premium!" It was the same thing.
Yeah,
But it had that effect. I'm not saying I do that with my knives,
yeah.
but I'm just saying, like, if you price something too cheap, people automatically start looking at, why is this cheap? Why is it? Because there is the whole mindset, which is true for the very majority of things. You get what you pay for. It is in the hunting and fishing land. Like when you buy like an $800 fly rod and you've cast it next to $100 fly rod, you notice the difference. It does not fight you. It works with you, everything. So you get what you pay for with these kind of things. And it should be the same way with knives.
I I totally get what you're saying about pricing products. It's very difficult to do. Not that I have a product I mean, I've done a couple of custom collaborations with Hogtooth Knives, and I know what it costs to buy it from him, and then I have to figure out how much I need to charge to make it worth my while. And I learned from the first time that yeah, it takes some doing, but I also learned that to make it worth my while makes it more expensive, and then you sell fewer. Like that was my experience.
Yeah.
But I, that was only two different little custom knife drop experiences. But yeah, that was a kind of agonizing decision to make. Also, it seems like naming knives is kind of a difficult thing.
Yeah, and especially once you start growing and then you have to worry about trademarks and everything, like even like the Wicket, we originally were gonna call it something like an Ewok. But then I'm like, I'm totally gonna get sued by Disney for this, so I can't do
Yeah,
that.
right.
But that's actually for a deep cut. Wicket is the name of the Ewok that finds Princess Leia when they first. So that's where the Wicket name came from, because it was a small, stout little knife that could do a lot of work, and I wouldn't mess around with it. And that's why we thought Ewok at first. But I'm like, all right, we got to go deeper so we don't get sued. And that's where Wicket came from.
That's awesome. Okay, so you've been saying we a bit. Uh, you work alone basically, right?
Yeah, but Lauren, my girlfriend, has been taking over a ton of the responsibilities. I mean, she's doing a lot of the planning at this point. She's doing certain things like assembling she's handling shipping and receiving, all the packing up and everything. She's been doing a lot to help me out with that. And we are planning on growing. I mean, right now it's still all run out of our house, but I'm already looking at shop space and at some point, employees down the road just to keep up with growth and everything. So things are growing, which is great. It's been, like I said, it's been a wild ride and it keeps getting wilder. But that's why when I say we, I'm like, even going to Blade Show, Texas, I had no idea where it was. She planned the flights, she did everything. And when we got to the hotel, I look at this convention center right next. I'm like, wow, that would be a nice place for Blade Show to be. And she was like, I think that's where it is. I'm like, oh, so it's because I've got so much on my plate. You can only handle so much as one person. That's one thing I learned quickly is to, you can't do everything and you can't be everything. I mean, you can if you want to stay small. Like I was talking to Scorpion Six Knives, and he's like, I love the way I do it. He's like, I only have to deal with a water jetter, and that's it. I grind everything myself. I heat treat it in house. I don't have to deal with any staffing, and that's great. And he's like, you can't do volume that way, but he could do it the way he wants to do. And he's his only bottleneck, if that makes sense. For me, like
Yeah.
I'm waiting on different vendors. I feel like I spend half my days now behind a cell phone or my computer. And then also I'm like, oh, wait, I have to go work now to make money.
And materials too. I'm sure getting your hands on materials can be difficult from time to time.
Managing supply chains has been very difficult. Like I said, if you're smaller, it's easier, but also you can't scale smaller like that. So if I'm trying to keep up with demand and also stay small, it's not really possible.
I think you're in a good position for this. So as we wrap here, like what advice would you give someone who wants to be where you are, who's maybe where you were 5 years ago?
Do a lot of research. Do a lot of research and build a network of people that you trust. Because I wouldn't have been able to do any of this if it wasn't for my friends and people that I met along the way. Like even tomorrow, I have a business meeting. We go drinking at a pub, but however, it's at a pub in the middle of the afternoon with a guy who writes for a bunch of different magazines, another one who does special security services and also works at Cold Cracker Bushcraft. Another guy who was a lieutenant in the police force, worked for the DOD, and has taken every survival course possible. I am going there to show off prototypes, ideas, designs, and they help me out by saying, yes, no, change this. This is dumb. Don't do that at all. Why don't you make this size for men? Those kind of comments. But I wouldn't be able to come out with the designs if I didn't have their help and feedback. Because it's like you need to build a community to help you out. Because, like I said earlier, you can't do everything yourself. You need help with these things.
Man, that makes a lot of sense because as a creator of any sort, you can really get caught in your own echo chamber. I think this is cool, and I can't take credit. That's a huge thing is being able to take criticism from people, and it's nice when you have friends who will bust your chops, and it's all in good fun, and they want to see you succeed. Um,
Yeah, it's all about building a community, and that's my one piece of advice. Do a lot of research on your own, but then also build a good network of people you trust.
Tom Nugent of Knives by Nuge, thank you so much for coming back on the Knife Junkie podcast. It's a pleasure, and I got to say, I love your knives, and I plan to expand my collection, but this thing has just really done it for me. I'm so happy and excited with this, as well as the neck knife. You know, I always go on and on about this. So anyway, thanks again for coming on. I appreciate it, sir.
I appreciate you, Bob.
There he goes, ladies and gentlemen. Tom Nugent of Knives by Nuge. Follow him on Instagram. It's knives_by_Nuge. And, watch for his drops. I know he's changing his model. It's evolving, but you can buy, I just saw a drop he put on today. So my point is catch up with him, check out what he's dropping, and watch as the company expands and his offerings expand. All right, for Jim working his magic behind the switcher, I'm Bob DeMarco saying until next time, don't take dull for an answer.
Thanks for listening to the Knife Junkie podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please rate and review at reviewthepodcast.com. For show notes for today's episode, additional resources, and to listen to past episodes, visit our website, TheKnifeJunkie.com. You can also watch our latest videos on YouTube at TheKnifeJunkie.com/YouTube. Check out some great knife photos on TheKnifeJunkie.com/Instagram, and join our Facebook group at TheKnifeJunkie.com/Facebook. And if you have a question or comment, email them to bob@TheKnifeJunkie.com or call our 24/7 listener line at 724-466-4487, and you may hear your comment or question answered on an upcoming episode of the Knife Junkie podcast.